The Story of Me is brought to you by LiUNA Ontario Provincial District Council. LiUNA, feel the power.
Greetings. In a country of such a complex ethnic and racial mix as Canada, she is a Canadian true and true, who's been an inspiring champion and tireless influencer of diversity in our society. We're going to say hello to Rosemary Sadlier. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for being here. I met you a few years ago.
Yes.
I was doing a little story on Matthew da Costa,
Yes.
the first person of African origin in Canada
The first person we have a name for.
that we have a name for.
Yeah.
We had a brief encounter, and since then, I wanted to sit down with you like this to talk a little more about your beautiful life path.
Well, thank you so much. I
and
appreciate
here
that.
we are. So
And here
thank you
we
again.
are.
You were born and raised in Toronto.
I was. I'm one of the very few people like me that has had that experience. Yes.
Yeah. Your father was a mechanic. Your mother had various jobs, one at Eaton's.
Yes.
But you were the only child, at least until you were 7.
Yes.
How was that, being the only child? Do you remember that phase of
Oh,
your
I
life?
do. Being the only child meant that my social life was all about school. So I was that terrible child that never stopped talking when I went to school. And it also meant that I had a lot of responsibilities very early on and was very independent very early
Really?
on.
Because sometimes only children, people say, spoiled. The
Not at
parents
all.
do everything for.
They didn't do everything for me at all. The
No.
expectation was that I pulled my own weight. And
Good for your
I
parents.
had definite responsibilities and obligations, frankly,
Yeah,
to help with the operation of our home.
wonderful. But at age 7, your parents adopted another child.
Yes.
All of a sudden, you're a sister.
It was truly all of a sudden, and not exactly. I was my neighborhood, everybody had brothers and sisters. So if it rained, they had somebody to play with when they had to stay inside.
Yeah.
I had complained and complained about being on my own. And what I didn't know is that my parents had been married a very long time before they were able to have me.
Uh-huh.
And fertility was clearly an issue. So they were not going to try again, and adoption seemed an easier route. So I remember one day going to the Children's Aid Society and peering through a one-way mirror or whatever, and seeing this cute little kid playing, and I was asked what I thought about her, and I thought, oh, she's cute. That was it. Little did I know she was going to end up coming to my house and being my sister.
That's interesting because you had a say in it. At age 7, your opinion was valued.
It was.
That's wonderful. Now, your roots in Canada
Yes.
go back to pre-Confederation. Your mom's family can be traced to 1840.
1830, 1840, they
Yeah.
came in on the Underground Railroad.
Yeah. And your father's ancestors arrived in New Brunswick in 1793. I know in the previous conversation that you seem to be very proud of this background. How did this history mold your identity?
You know, I think like many Canadians, we don't think much about our backgrounds. But as a Black kid in my neighborhood, it still wasn't necessarily an issue, but it became more of an issue outside of my own neighborhood. And you start to realize how very unique and distinct being a person of African origin who
Yeah.
has long roots in this country really is.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is that I was a little bit shocked to find out that my family had been in this country so very long, and I really knew so very little about not my family, but people who looked like us
Yes.
and had lived and loved and defended and helped to build this country from the very beginning. And somehow our stories weren't being told. No representation of us in a very
No.
positive way.
And is it fair to say that a lot of Canadians, then and to some extent still now, think that Black people were not really born here?
I think it depends on what part of the country.
Of the country, yeah.
But certainly, I would be asked over and over by total strangers who I had no connection to
Yeah.
where I was from. And when you give them the answer and they don't believe you,
Really?
you realize how very little people know about
Yeah.
the long experience of people of African
right.
origin in this country.
Yeah. Now, in your youth, church was very much part of your life. Some of your descendants, actually, relatives, had careers in the church.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they're pretty much everywhere in southern Ontario where there was a Black church. There was somebody who was either a very immediate relative of mine or a cousin in some way. And actually, one of the ministers of the British Methodist Episcopal Church of Canada,
Yeah.
Reverend Jackson, was a cousin, and he was the last person to be the minister of the location on Chestnut Street
Yeah.
before they moved to Shaw Street and
Yeah.
along many years ago.
As a youth, how involved were you in the church?
I was very involved. The church was pretty much my social life. That was how my mother was raised, and having the control and the influence over me
Yeah.
and my sister, our lives started to sort of take the same path. And at one point, well, for a very long point, I was the president of the national Sunday School Convention and Young People's Society of my church.
Mm-hmm.
And what the church meant for me was an opportunity to see and be reflected and know from my own lived experience that there were other people of African origin across this country who had been here for a very long time, built churches, built schools, been incredibly resilient. And that was a very helpful message to me.
For you. You have degrees in teaching and social work.
Yes.
You went to Glendon College
Yes.
for undergraduate studies, Masters of Social Work, University of Toronto,
Yes.
Bachelor of Education, University of Toronto, a doctorate at OAZ.
Well, the doctorate I'm still working on, but I
Oh.
completed my coursework.
Okay, maybe we should have you back here when you become a
You can
doctor.
absolutely
We can
have me
say
back.
Doctor. Now, in the 1980s, after graduation, you applied for a position as social worker with Children's Aid Society, but you did not become a social worker. What happened?
That was my dream job.
Yeah.
In addition to becoming a big sister, I became aware of some of the real problems that existed with child welfare, our child welfare
Yeah.
system in this country. And I wanted to address those issues. I felt that one of the ways of doing so was by having my master's degree in social work, by working for the Children's Aid Society, to help to create the change from within that organization. I wasn't hired, And I wasn't hired because I was Black. And I was told that at the time.
You were told that you could not get the job because you were Black.
Yes.
This is in the 1980s.
Yes, but there was a clear expectation that, and I was told this, that people who were to be social workers were to be white, and people who were being provided the assistance might be any racial background. But the expectation that I, as a Black woman, work in this field was not supported by the agency at that time. Now, maybe if I'd had other qualifications, the fact that I was a Black Canadian woman and not a new Canadian woman, having a connection with a community that I don't know what the problem was, but I believe it was about.
How did you feel about all this at the time?
I was gutted. This is something that I had been working towards for a very long time. And certainly I applied for other types of social work positions at the time. But I was also married and wanting to start a family, so that was the move that I made at that point.
Yeah. So I know that you did get pregnant.
Yes, 3 times.
which complicates finding a job and so on at
Very
roughly
much.
this time, right?
Yes.
But do you think that ultimately it affected you finding other jobs?
Oh, absolutely. I paid a very high price for being Black, but I also paid a high price for being a mother. Childcare was very expensive. When I did my teaching degree, I was actually unexpectedly or surprisingly pregnant. And I have yet to find anybody who's excited to hire a Black woman who has 2 children at home and is 9 months pregnant with her 3rd, which was the situation I found myself in when I was getting my teaching degree. So, and also the need to nurse my children for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
Women in general are incredibly disadvantaged as a result of having children in a way that we really shouldn't be, and particularly at that point in time.
Yeah. You mentioned the teaching degree. That was, you went back to school in 92. And as you said, you got pregnant, and ultimately you were able to get some social work and teaching contracts.
I did, yes.
But you told me in a previous conversation that they did not pay well, were not very fulfilling.
Well, sometimes a contract is, it's short term, it's a couple of months. I mean, you can't plan around it, and it's just not a great way to be able to manage when you have to make plans in terms of childcare and other parts of your life. It was a challenge. So when I ended up also expanding my work, or frankly, unexpectedly finding myself the president of the Ontario Black History Society, I found that the opportunities to express and affirm and advocate on behalf of the African Canadian community were very meaningful to me.
Yeah. We're going to talk about your illustrious career in the community as a volunteer and so on. But I just wanted to you to reflect on the fact that you must have had a series of frustrations about the employment situation and the reasons why you were not being given jobs. But what's really amazing is that this did not deter you from fighting to affirm your identity and that of your community. And that's now the time to talk about your involvement in the community, but it did not deter you.
It didn't deter me
You
because,
didn't say, the hell with it, I'm going to raise my children and I'm not going to worry about others.
well, I think that it kind of worked the other way. Knowing what I had gone through, knowing that I had done everything that one ought to do in order to get the job that they want to help their community, I realized that if I didn't continue to work on making certain changes in our community, my children would be faced with the same
That's
thing. And so in my volunteer, unpaid efforts with the Ontario Black History Society, even though sometimes I was also conducting other contractual engagements, it gave me the opportunity to fight and address in the ways that I could with the resources I had certain stereotypes
Yeah.
and to begin a way of raising awareness and fighting anti-Black racism.
To make sure that people didn't go what you had gone through in some ways.
Absolutely.
So between 1993 and 2015, you were the president of the Ontario Black History Society. Tell me briefly about this society.
It was the only provincial heritage organization in the country focused on Black history. And it had been founded by Dr. Daniel G. Hill and Lorraine Kazmarski, Donna Hill, so many people.
So the mission here would be to teach Black history, do research, do outreach programs?
Yes.
perhaps? Yeah.
And so what often much of the work that I performed myself
Yeah.
was to go into schools and give Black history presentations, go to conferences, go to
Yes.
any event, any event
Yeah.
possible, in order to raise awareness
Yeah.
about African Canadian history.
I know that you exerted some pressure on the Canadian government
I did.
to make a celebration of Black History Month a national event.
I did.
This was quite an accomplishment, wasn't it?
It was. And it happened only because things had not been properly secured with the City of Toronto. When I became president, there was it was left hanging, and if apparently had to request it every month.
Yeah.
And the organization had already been able to get Black History Month with the City of Toronto since 1979. And every year, unbeknownst to me, they had gone to the city saying, we need a proclamation for Black History Month. I sought a secured, automatic proclamation with the city, one with Metro Toronto, and one with the province of Ontario.
Yes.
And all the while continuing to build up an interest and a momentum in this event, growing our signature event, a brunch, from 95 people to 1,000 people. All these things, and then ultimately going to members of the federal government to secure their support.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it was Jean Augustine who did move it forward. But why? Because there was a community of support already there, willing to see this happen.
But the process was not easy. It never is.
Not really, no.
Now, along with the establishment of the National Black History Month, you also initiated the formal celebration of August 1st as Emancipation Day.
Absolutely.
Another victory.
I am so thankful. It was just passed in March of 2021,
Yeah.
but the road to that passage started in 1995. I began working, the idea was actually introduced to me by a colleague from Trinidad and Tobago. By 1996, I had secured proclamations from the City of Toronto, Metro Toronto, and the City of Ottawa. I approached it in a nonpartisan way, continuing to build up a community of interest through events, through programming, educational initiatives, and so forth. And it actually had gone to the province by 2008 and was the first unanimous all-party bill of the province of Ontario,
Yeah.
Bill 111.
Yeah.
But it had also, prior to that, gone to the House of Commons twice
Yes.
on a private member's bill, 1999 and 2000, unsuccessfully. So with the new Trudeau government coming in and a new role that I had with another organization, I began, and I actually, even before that, I had been trying to move this forward. I was able to secure support for a national August 1st commemoration,
Emancipation Day.
and it finally went through. It's phenomenal, so I'm very appreciative of what MP Majid Jahouri was able to do, and thankful that all members in the House and ultimately all members in the Senate adopted it.
You were also involved in the Black International Film Festival?
I created that.
You did create it.
I did. I was incredibly frustrated because what I found was, despite there being a Black History Month for some years, that TIFF as an entity didn't seem to offer very many films by or about people of African origin in any part of the world. And I created BIFF, the Black International
Yeah.
Film Festival, using, with no money, mostly creativity and a lot of favors from the National Film Board. And this festival lasted for about 5 years, helping to showcase African Canadian films or subject matter or films done by African Canadian producers and filmmakers. But also, before the end of that, my ability to hold that festival, I was able to bring in international partners, having the South African Council General bring in films such as Fizika's Voice and others. So I'm very proud of what that did.
Yeah.
And the reason that we ended it is because TIFF began offering more African Canadian films.
Very good. Now, aside from being a promoter of Black history and Black activities in Canada, you're also an advocate, member of the Canada Post Stamp Advisory Committee. You were able to have a stamp dedicated to the number 2 Construction Battalion. We're going to talk about this battalion soon, as well as a stamp to include the first named African
Matthew
person to arrive in
DaCosta,
Canada,
yes.
Matthew DaCosta, that we
Yes.
spoke about. So 2 stamps. But more recently, you're also making some efforts to recognize the Honorable Lincoln Alexander.
Yes.
I know that I read on your biography that you were really trying to secure some recognition, physical recognition, a
Well,
bust.
Yes, exactly. Like we were successful in having a national day named after Lincoln Alexander
Yes.
in January.
Yeah.
But I've been working on trying also to have a bust erected of Lincoln Alexander at Queen's Park.
At Queen's Park.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's still in the making, right?
It's still in the making.
Yeah.
As our only Black vice regal in the first, really, I think it's important to commemorate him.
I had the pleasure of meeting him, a true gentleman.
He really was.
He looked very distinguished. And
Very distinguished.
He exuded something,
And he had
warmth.
he had a warmth and a great
Yeah.
singing voice.
Yeah, a great voice. Okay, so promoter, advocate. I say teacher because I'm thinking of the presentations that you've made throughout your life. You've presented nationally, internationally, including the United Nations. How was that experience with the UN?
It was good because it's really always wonderful to know that you have offered an important message and it's been heard and it's been incorporated. And I've given deputations actually a couple of times to the UN Rapporteur on racism, and some of what I offered in terms of African Canadian history or the situation of people of African origin in this country has been reflected in the reports produced.
This must have been a memorable moment for you. Any others?
Well, there's so many.
There's so many.
I've been very lucky that way, and so many more that need to happen. But to have met some incredibly important and influential people, to have met some wonderful and regular people, to have been able to encourage and know that I have made a difference, to have been told that I made a difference for somebody because of some of the work that I've been able to affect, or the books that I've been able to write. This is important.
Yes, you're also an author.
Yes, I
You
am.
still have time for that, and you've written for children.
I've written for children, and I've
Very
written.
important, eh?
I think so. I think people feel that you need to wait until you're an adult to consider certain topics, but I think it's too late. Children need to be exposed to things that impact them, that touch them, that hurt them, that challenge them early in their lives, so that they can form their own ways of understanding and their own coping skills.
As early as possible.
And I think that if we're going to develop an appetite and an interest for African Canadian history, which needs to happen, that we need to start as early as possible.
Now, you mentioned a lot of the people you've met. I think it was interesting because I saw that as you're answering the question, important moments. I guess it's, in the end, it's also the people you meet, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. You met this gentleman, Mr. Glover,
Yes.
the actor.
Yes.
I've seen pictures of you with Reverend Jesse Jackson,
Yes.
Mr. Haley of Roots.
Yes, I met him. I've
Wow.
met Dick Gregory. I've met Kirk Franklin. I've even met the President Barack Obama, as well as every sitting prime minister in Canada for the past couple of decades.
Yeah.
So there are some very influential and important people nationally and internationally that I've had the opportunity to meet. But I've also had the opportunity to work with some incredible people who've been able to go on and make a difference as well.
Yeah. You have made a difference, and for your accomplishments, you have received several awards.
I have.
Order of Ontario, the Black Lynx Award. This is just to name a few. The Planet Africa Marcus Garvey Award, the Harry Jerome Award,
Yes.
and most recently, you received the Lifetime Achiever Award from the International Women Achievers Awards.
I have.
Wow.
The awards are a wonderful affirmation,
Yes.
and from coming often from your own community
Yeah.
or from the broader community. And it's nice to know that people appreciate the work that you've done.
Oh, yeah. But I'm really intrigued about another trophy, an award. It's called the Rosemary Sadlier Freedom Award. There is an award with your name.
There is. I don't even know where to begin with that. I for a number of years I had presented on Emancipation Day to a group, and last year on CBC, because of COVID, protocols in 2020,
Yeah.
the Rosemary Sadlier Award was announced, And not only was it announced, and I'm so humbled by that,
What an honor.
but for my work on helping to
Yeah.
get Emancipation Day out there
Wow.
in terms of officially commemorating it.
Yeah.
And the award was presented on television to Julie Black. So
Yeah.
this award apparently will be presented annually, and I look forward to seeing who it will be presented to again and in the coming years.
Yeah. You have 3 grown children.
I do.
What do they say about mom?
Well, I think that
They better be proud.
they're proud, but it comes across in different ways. I mean, I'm mom, right?
Yeah.
I'm still the person who makes banana bread, and you know, I'm still mom. I'm the person who went to all of their games, all of their performances. I'm still that person, and I certainly do everything I can to continue to support them in what they're doing now. But yes, they're proud of me. And but I think it's sort of like, oh yeah, that's mom. Yeah, okay, she's on TV. Yeah, that's mom.
Yeah. Now, throughout your busy life, did you have time for hobbies for yourself?
I do. My hobbies include, I love theater, I love dance, I love photography. I have an interest in cooking. I'm a very good cook. And those are things that I do.
So you take some time for
And I
for
love
yourself.
travel, but you know, when I can. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, we're coming to the final stretch. I'm having fun talking to you.
Well, I'm
And
having
I'm
fun
learning.
too.
I'm
I
learning.
enjoy this. It wasn't as painful to talk about myself as I thought it might be.
I want to end up the conversation talking about racism in Canada, present and future. And the reason is that you've devoted most of your life to fight it. Presently, there is a heated debate about our colonial past, about the practice of racism in this country. This is almost unprecedented. What's your take on this, on what's happening right now?
Well, these are not new things for people in the African Canadian community who've experienced things for themselves or who know of people who have. I think that what has happened is very much due to the pandemics. Had George Floyd not been publicly executed, had we not all been in a position of having the opportunity, whether we wanted to or not, to witness that because we were all confined to our quarters, I think that we would maybe it would have just gone by and not have had the same kind of meaning. But I think that because it happened,
Yeah.
we have all, whether you really wanted to or not, had to think about what kind of society do we want for ourselves and for our children and for the next 7 generations. If this is what we have been doing and have somehow failed to notice it or change it, now is the time for us to do
Yeah.
so.
Normally, I would say normally it takes a dramatic happening, a trauma, for change to take place.
It does,
And,
unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, but it seems to be a human trait. Do you see this present debate? And I know you've expressed hope, but do you see any improvements in race relations in this country as a result of this conversation?
I think we're still in the process. I think that, you know, the fact that we're able to consider possibilities, the fact that we're able to have more open discussions,
Yeah.
the fact that people are getting more comfortable understanding that Black Lives Matters means that extra and specific attention needs to be provided to ensure that Black lives are cherished and affirmed. I think that all of these things are part of a process,
Yeah.
but we're not there yet. We're not post-racial. It isn't over. We still have barriers to employment. We still have overrepresentation of Black people in areas where there doesn't necessarily need to be that overrepresentation. There are still changes that need to be made, and there are still people that need to be in agencies, boards, and commissions, and hired into different positions that have yet to happen. We're in the process of change. We're not on the other side of the change.
You're still apparently quite active in advocating. I just read a few days ago that the government of Canada is going to officially formalize an apology for the racist treatment of members of Canada's only Black military unit, which is the number 2 Construction Battalion. I'm mentioning this because I know you've written letters in the past to the Minister of Defense on this very issue.
I have. And I think that people may not realize, they were not the first because, Canada became Canada in 1867.
Yeah.
There were other Black units that had been formed, like Captain Runchie's Corps of Colored Men, but that was before 1867. But the number 2 Construction Battalion, these were men that wanted to defend Canada and were told they couldn't even join the military. We're told it was a white man's war and to go home.
Again, because they were Black.
Because they were Black.
Yeah.
And they continued, they persisted, and the war, things changed. They were finally included, but only allowed to do much of the construction or support kind of positions. And when they came back, they weren't treated like, thank you. There was no appreciation offered for their efforts. They were made to feel like they really were not fully human or not fully men in defense of this country. And when you consider 60% of the recruits who were from New Brunswick were related to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a legacy, a generational trauma that continues to this day.
And I think it's fair to say that in part, thanks to your efforts, recognition is coming.
Well,
the government has promised in 2022 to formally apologize.
My efforts, and absolutely the efforts of Calvin Ruck, I would say first and foremost, because Calvin Ruck really did help to shine a light on the experiences of these men, and that was very important.
Before I say goodbye, can you promise me something?
What is that?
Keep up the good work, please.
Well, thank you. I will absolutely try.
Our society needs people like you.
Thank you.
And I thank you so much for sharing your very distinguished and impactful work in the community. It's been an honor.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bill.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Thank you. And we say goodbye to our viewers. Until next time. Thank you.